Hello, my name is Sidney Pertnoy, and I am chair of the board of the Holocaust Memorial in Miami Beach. It gives me great pleasure to be able to say a few words on behalf of the organization who sponsored Names Not Numbers in your school. We are currently living through extraordinary times and have had to adjust to our new reality. Under these conditions, working from your homes, you were able to complete this project, and for that we are grateful to all of the students for your dedication. Thank you to the teachers and schools for ensuring that your students could benefit from the Names Not Numbers program. This year, schools from Miami, Broward County, Palm Beach County, and Orlando all participated, creating documentaries that will be a part of the historical record. You should all be very proud. Most importantly, I want to thank our Holocaust survivors who participated. They are true heroes, and we are forever indebted to these brave individuals who volunteer their time and give of their heart. To all the students who participated in this project, I sincerely hope that you take with you memories that will last a lifetime. Thank you to Sharon Horowitz, Executive Director of the Holocaust Memorial Miami Beach, and Daniel Reed, Education Coordinator, for sponsoring the Names Not Numbers program for the second year. Recognize the importance of this program, the Florida Department of Education generously funded our efforts. Our deepest appreciation to Tova Rosenberg, the director and founder of Names Not Numbers, for creating this program, and to the filmmakers and editors who helped create these films. As time marches on and our precious survivors continue to age, it is up to the next generation to stand up against all forms of racism and bigotry. The films you helped create are a testament to the importance of teaching about the Holocaust and triumphing over hatred. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Emily Miranda, a senior at Miami Sunset Senior High School and a student of Miss Cross's. The following is a documentary that acknowledges and honors the innocent men, women, and children who survived through the extreme perilous times that we know as the Holocaust. It is important to be informed of these inhumane conditions and unimaginable despair that took place in this time period. Thanks to Mrs. Cross and Mrs. Gutierrez, we were able to collaborate with Names Not Numbers and the Holocaust Miami Beach Memorial. A group of us students were able to practice important skills while learning about this tragic time. We learned 21st century media skills, interview skills, and most importantly, we gained the experience of a lifetime by learning and understanding these personal and powerful stories. This documentary took months of teamwork, commitment, and passion to put together. As the students were preparing to meet these survivors with their questions, we began to understand the true importance of these survivors. We each had a tremendous respect for them. I believe that together as a class, we can say that understanding and learning from these tragedies in the past is the #1 way to combat intolerance and hate for another. Together, we are so grateful for this opportunity to firsthand hear these phenomenal stories and put together this documentary. As young students, this kind of information, this kind of history, it is vital to ensure that events like the Holocaust never happen again. My peers and I are tomorrow. We control what lies ahead in this world. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you.
Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. The Names Not Numbers Oral History Film Documentary Project is remembering the stories of the Holocaust and is telling the story of the Holocaust for the world to hear, for the world to learn, and to inspire future generations to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and intolerance. This unique project is in its 16th year. Over 2,500 survivors and 6,000 students have participated in it worldwide. The students were instructed by teachers and professionals. They learned interviewing techniques from journalists. They learned filming techniques and editing skills from documentary filmmakers. The students interviewed, filmed, and edited the 2-hour interviews with each survivor to make 20-minute oral histories that are compiled in the Names Not Numbers documentary at the school. You're about to view the documentary Names Not Numbers, a movie in the making. This film chronicles the students as they are being trained by the professionals and includes their reflections. In it is embedded approximately 10 minutes from each interview. This is the students' work. They're filmed and edited interviews. Through this project, our students are preserving history, and they are the witnesses to the witnesses.
Pretty sure I was in second grade. They told us, okay guys, we're gonna be studying the Holocaust. When you're that little, you don't really think like, oh, the world's a bad place, or there's nothing bad that happens. So it was kind of like shocking. And it was like really sad to see that humans went to such a low point. So it was kind of like a learning experience, but it was kind of terrifying.
You got an armband on the left hand, and if you didn't put it on, they kill you.
If a Jew got killed, it wasn't a crime.
We saw the planes coming over every day, bombing.
The train was stopped. The Jewish people were removed, shot, killed, and thrown in the ditch.
A lot of people ran to the fence to touch the wires and kill themselves.
Hi everybody, I'm so happy you were able to join us today. We are very excited that you agreed to take part on this project. It's going to be an amazing project. In just a few minutes, you're going to have Principal Lux come and give you guys a few words.
Several generations prior to me, my grandparents, parents witnessed through the atrocities of war, and prior to the atrocities of war, the attempt of extincting a cultural group of people. A man named Hitler took over. Part of what he tried to do was to remove Jewish people from our planet. And he did it in a way that was horrible.
I decided to do names, not numbers, because really it was an experience that I probably won't ever have again. These survivors are passing away day by day, and I don't think I would get close to like interviewing another Holocaust survivor anywhere else other than in this documentary.
I decided to do it because I'm someone who has like a lot of interest in getting to know really everything that I can know about the world. I thought it would be really cool to kind of live vicariously through the stories that I get told.
At the Holocaust Memorial, we work daily with Holocaust survivors. They want to tell their story. They want their story to be heard. And one of the things that they are most afraid of is that when they die, when their generation passes on, which is within the next few years, that nobody will be interested in what happened.
The best way I know my future is by studying my past. That part of our past as a human race, as of all of us on this planet, is something that we can't forget.
I'm very appreciative of the Holocaust survivors coming here to speak to us, because I know even though it's past, it still hurts them reliving the story every time they tell it. I feel honored that they're doing this because they don't want us to forget. And it's our duty doing this interview and this documentary to broadcast to the world that this cannot happen again, that this was a very, traumatic thing, and we can't forget about this.
History is repeating itself. They're putting immigrants in concentration camps, and they're treating them almost, if not the same, as to how they did the Jews.
This generation, most people don't know what's going on. They just care about like
They just care about social media and all that. There's so many things happening in this country that no one knows about, or most people don't know about. Like, for example, in China, there's a Muslim concentration camp. Most people don't know about that. It's not on the news, and I feel like that should be let out. People should know about that. And it's the same thing as the Holocaust concentration camp. And I feel like it's important to let that out.
Okay, and that's where a project like Names Not Numbers comes in. Because you all are embarking on a project in the next few weeks, in the next few months, where you are actually going to become witnesses to the witnesses.
Names Not Numbers means that we're giving faces to these numbers. It's not, we're trying to make it feel as it's not just, oh, it was this amount of people that died, or it was this amount of people that suffered this tragedy, but it's giving them a face.
The people who went through the Holocaust aren't just a number that they had to be given, but they're people with experiences just like anyone else.
Just like you or I, we have our own complete story. So what you're helping preserve are these people's stories. One of the things the Holocaust Memorial is doing with some of the films that you produce is that we are creating lesson plans and posting them online to be used for teachers, and they can be used in school districts throughout Florida. Okay, we're also archiving them in universities and museums, okay, both here in the States and in Israel.
A good conversation is all about you just being there, being present, listening to the person. Conducting a good interview is having a good conversation. The more you move from a formal interview to talking to another human being, the better the journalism is going to get. And I wouldn't treat almost any interview, if not any interview, with more careful hands and with more respect than when you're talking to a Holocaust survivor. So few people in their lives get the opportunity to do that.
So I did a podcast and I'm part of newspapers, so I am very big in journalism, and being able to meet another journalist and being able to sit down with them and them to understand what it is to them to interview and the proper way of interviewing. It was very informative, and it was a very cool experience to go through because I did learn a lot of new things, how to guide conversations and things like that. Every student got a chance to see how cameras worked and shots and angles that are going to help us through the documentary process.
The camera has to be set on eye level. Either the person is standing or sitting, you always want to have the camera, depending on where you're trying to communicate. But for this matter, since we want the audience to just feel like they're having a conversation with a survivor, we want to set the camera to eye level. A very important thing for recording a documentary, it's obviously have the person on focus and also the audio. Always pay attention to the audio, because if there's no audio, you're just gonna have like a talking head with no audio, and obviously that's not gonna work out.
That was a lot of fun. I was like open to like a whole bunch of new things that I never thought of. When we tested out the microphone to listen to the different audio, and how you can go from like background, like with background noise, and all of a sudden with the mic, how it was so clear. That was really cool.
I think it's so important to keep talking about the Holocaust, because it's something that not everyone's going to be able to live through and have the experience I'm having right now of talking to a survivor.
I feel like I need to study over the questions a little bit though. But yeah, I'm really excited to ask him a bunch of things about his life and hear about what he has to say.
It makes me feel a bit nervous, anticipating, but also kind of excited that I'm part of this project and get to talk to someone this important and really get a deep, sighting into what they experienced throughout the Holocaust.
Most books don't really have an account of a specific person. It just talks about Jewish people as a whole. Now you get to actually sit down and talk to somebody that was alive and actually went through this stuff. So you may get a little bit more than you would from books.
I think it's very hard for them to relive
their experience in the Holocaust. It's like an honor to have them here.
My name is Jack Waxel. I was born in 1924 in September in Poland. My family was, my father was a shochet, my mother was a housekeeper. I got one brother and two sisters. My older brother was 3 years older than me. The sister was older than me. I got a younger sister. She was the youngster. When the Germans came in, she was 9 years old.
Gunther Carter.
When were you born?
When? 1933, March 16th. Where? Schmieheim, Germany. Parents, mother and father, grandparents, that's the family living in the same house. I don't have much memory of my time in Germany, which was the time I had with my parents. I barely remember my mother, as a matter of fact. The major thing I remember of my father was that he played the piano.
My name is Laszlo Sally, but Sally was not always my real name. So when I was born, my name was Schwarz. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, in 1937, December the 31st. My family was, of course, my father, my mother, my grandparents from my father's side, and I do have a twin brother. My father was a small businessman. He worked, he had some kind of a shop. He worked with 3-4 people, maybe. My mother was a homemaker.
George Gabor, yeah.
Where were you born?
Budapest, Hungary, 1938. Actually, I came from a higher middle class family, I would say. My father was a jeweler in Hungary with his own shop. He was part of the Budapest Exchange, dealing with gold and diamonds.
My name is David Murmelstein, born in Czechoslovakia, December 21, 1928. We had regular schools and 10 stores. Well, while it was Czechoslovakia, never heard an anti-Semitic or anything being hit somebody or anything, never happened.
There was no feeling of anti-Semitism, and everything was fine, and things started changing.
Beginning of 39 started to become anti-Semitism so bad. If you was in the synagogue, all of a sudden they knocked you glass out from the windows, and police never helped, never went to stay against it. It was terrible. It was starting to become terrible anti-Semitism. They knocked the windows out in the synagogue.
But after a month, they sent us home because we can't go to a school because we were Jews. First, they took away the businesses from the Jews, and we couldn't do nothing, so it was very difficult.
But it all changed when the Nazis, the Germans actually occupied Hungary.
I was sent away in the fall of 1939, or approximately September, to Sweden. This was a last transport of children 6 years or younger out of Europe. By the time I was sent away, there were 15 Jewish people in this town. People had left over time, realizing that it was not a good thing to stay. The people who remained, after I was sent away, there were 14 left. I was the 15th. All of those 14 persons, 8 of whom were my parents, grandparents, and some other relatives, were sent to a concentration camp in southern France, and none of them survived. My parents were still alive in 1942 when that camp was closed, and all the survivors of that camp were transported directly to Auschwitz and killed on arrival, approximately spring of 1942. When I was sent away at age 6 in 1939 on a children's transport to Sweden, the first thing I remember was sitting on a black suitcase in a train station in southern Sweden, and I remember nearly nothing of anything before.
It was nowhere to hide. They come in with the tanks and everything, and the first night was quiet. The second night, that was they come up with the high thinking, talk about all the Jews has to go out, come out to work. In Poland, when it starts snowing, you have to go out and clean the highway. 8 kilometers. Kids was cleaning every day the snow. We have to be silent. We couldn't have nothing. You know, we have to do it whatever they was asking us to do it.
Hungary was the last country, actually, that was occupied. So we were the last one. The day was March 19, 1944. I think was a Sunday, I believe. Everybody's out in the street, you know, everybody's happy. The Germans came in, white horses, nicely dressed, everything. People were lining the street, they were all cheering, you know. It was a wonderful thing. It was like a fiesta, you know, for them, not for us. And we were not happy to see them, of course, but a lot of people were. No fire shot, without one single shot. Well, they came in, occupied, because we had a lot of, the Hungarian government always had a tie with Germany, Austria, Germany. At one time, it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
At that time, I was a kid and I did not really realize what was happening. The only thing that I noticed is that we could no longer go to the museum because Jews were not allowed. And there was a big sign on the front door saying that Jews are not allowed. So life changed, and changed drastically.
If you were a Jew at that time and you got beaten up, you couldn't go anywhere. That's it. That was not a crime to beat up somebody. You could be stopped any place. You have no civil rights whatsoever. So there's no place to turn to, oh, he beat me up or whatever. You got killed. If a Jew got killed for some reason, it wasn't a crime. You couldn't take it to court. Oh, that's nothing. Okay, that's it. One less.
They took us to a ghetto, a place, a temporary place.
In the case of Budapest, because the ghetto was very small, they had to move into designated Jewish houses. They simply painted a yellow star on a building, and that became a designated Jewish house, and Jews had to move in there whether they had an apartment or not. I didn't know what was happening, you know, and I was bewildered. I didn't know why we had to leave our apartment, why we had to move to this place.
And I went with my mother. I didn't go, they made me go. Everybody to a ghetto that was blocked off with barbed wire and granite. Okay, that we had to be there. My mother was killed on the street. One day, she went out to get food. You remember, there was a curfew, and she didn't come back.
Who did you live with after your mom passed away?
Nobody particular, nobody particular. I have no recollection, you know, simply wandering all over the place. Basically, no specific space to stay.
When we come out, the young people, they took us hostages, about 50 or something, away from our city, from Yedlinsk, to Radom. But they beat us. This one night we was over there, 2 nights. We was beating up everybody the whole day. You went out to work later, maybe they give you a soup before the evening. That's all what you got when we was the hostages. When the Germans come in, that was the first or second day. The third day, when they let us loose back to home, they burned up the synagogue.
There was a law that we cannot go out of the designated Jewish house except one day a week to do shopping. But the day that the Jews were allowed to go out, some of the merchants didn't even open up because they did not want to deal with Jews. And the ones who did raised their prices, also put out the worst merchandise that they could not sell to anybody else. You know, the rotted tomatoes, the soft potatoes and onions, and this is what the Jews could buy if they had money. All Jews, regardless of age, had to wear yellow stars outside their clothing.
So we're always marginalized in a way. Look at the face. Look happy, doesn't look unhappy, right? Because you couldn't possibly imagine what would it bring, what would it mean to wear the yellow star. You know what? At that time I was very proud. I had no idea, 6-year-old, no idea what it really significant. I mean, what significance it had, what consequence it could possibly have.
The star was not, you didn't have no choice. Or you wear it or you get killed. You have to wear it.
Did you go to school in the ghettos?
No, forget it.
First of all, there was no school for the Jews. Jews did not go to school.
Don't forget, the ghetto was supposed to be liquidated completely, but they have taken every day groups of people to work. So there were apartments that were open. We went in, we and other kids, you know, and just got there and occupied when whatever it was there, we took it.
When they liquidated the ghetto, they didn't just liquidate us. They told them to bring out every dog was killed before they liquidated the ghetto. They killed every Jewish dog. If somebody didn't brought out the dog, they would kill him. And some of them, when they brought out, some of them got killed when they hold the dog on the hand. It was a disaster by liquidating the ghetto. When they liquidated the ghetto, they make camps. That was camps to work. They took so many Jewish people out. Our family was picking up to go to a labor camp.
What happened during this time is that the deportations started. And we saw from the window the Nazis come to these buildings, herding the people out on the street, lining them up, and with clubs and whips and dogs, and they also have guns, of course, and marching the people out into the railroad station to take them to the camp. At this time, we had an aunt, and really she wasn't an aunt, she was just a family friend. But to little kids, you know, they introduced us to her as, this is your auntie, which people always do. So that's how we knew her. And she wasn't Jewish. And what's more, she was the member of a Nazi party. And she walked around with the armband of the swastika, and I believe she had a gun on her hip. And she came to us one day and she offered to take my twin brother and me with her and to see if she could save us from deportation. We had no choice in the matter, we had to go with her. She had a little tobacco store, a little small place. At this place, life was very difficult because first of all, we were given new names. We were told never ever to tell anybody our real name. She had a young woman working for her, and this young woman kind of felt that something was not right and kept asking us constantly what our real name was. And one day she came to me with a piece of candy, and she said, I can have this candy if I tell her my real name. I was a little kid, what did I know? All I knew is that I wanted this candy real bad. And I told her. Aunt overheard this from behind the curtain, and she ran out and she fired the girl immediately, threw her out of there. And then within 5 minutes, we were on our way back to our parents, the designated Jewish house, and perhaps to wait for the deportation. It was a capital offense to hide a Jew.
How long were you there for?
In the ghetto, till they got a train, a cattle car train, that is. Just filled up the wagons, put in 2 buckets. A bucket of water to the right, and a bucket for the bathroom on the other side. Well, you can imagine the smells. We left, let's say, from our hometown, next to the hometown, till we got to Poland. We didn't know when it was day or night. It was dark the whole time. So we didn't even know where we were going and when we would arrive. When we got out, we saw the sign, the name of the camp, Auschwitz. In Poland, the sign said Auschwitz. But we didn't have no idea what that meant.
The kindergarten that I went to, there were 2 Jewish children in this kindergarten, myself being one and a girl 1 year younger being the other. 1 year before I was sent away, her family left, bound for parts in the east on the train. The train was stopped. The Jewish people were removed, shot, killed, and thrown in the ditch, including her. Those 500 kids, that transport had been arranged by an organization that had asked the Pentecostal Church of Sweden to take these kids in. So I was one of those kids who was taken in into a Christian farming family in northwestern Sweden. This was the kind of place you probably never heard of, or you certainly have never seen. Like, if you want to go to the bathroom, you go to an outhouse. If you want to take a bath in the summertime, you go down to the river and take a swim. If you want to take a bath in the wintertime, in another outhouse, there was a half of a barrel, sewed-off barrel. Underneath, you have some wood. You burn the wood and you heat the water. That's how you take a bath in the wintertime. There were no other Jewish people in this town. If there's no Jewish people there, there's no synagogues. We went to church every Sunday, prayer meetings Sunday night, and
They were Christian, right?
this is the life they lived. This is the life I had for 5 years. I was probably the only Jewish person anybody in that village had ever seen. I was the shortest person in school and the only one with black hair. Everybody else was tall and blonde. There were no Nazis in Sweden. Sweden was one of 2 European countries, neutral, not invaded. When I was 11 years old in 1944, in this town, this village, was headquartered a Norwegian resistance brigade. And the assignment it had was to destroy trains and bridges in eastern Norway. Germany had rather well advanced toward developing the atomic bomb. I don't know if this is too well known. In Norway, you had 2 or 3 lakes that had an abundance of what is known as heavy water, which is an ingredient used in the refining of uranium into plutonium. And so they needed that in the German labs, and the assignment this brigade had was to blow up the tank cars carrying this water. I had joined this brigade, and I went on 3 missions. I helped to destroy 2 bridges and 1 train. I was the kid at age 11 that wrapped the fusing wire around the leg of the bridge and ran it to the person with a detonator. So I wasn't afraid of the Germans and the Nazis finding me. They probably were afraid of running into me.
I have no recollection on, and I tell you, there were about a month and a half in my life that I have no recollection. It's blank, completely blank. But I know one thing, that the Red Cross, International Red Cross, picked me up from someplace and took me to a hospital. I lived with, at the beginning, remember I was 6 or 7 years old, with 2 ladies who know my parents real well. And for a while, then I was sent to an orphanage.
Well, most of the Hungarian Jews were deported to the death camps. Mm-hmm. We were little kids, we were bewildered, we were terrified. We didn't know why it's happening. My parents got a hold of some new papers by a Swedish diplomat called Raoul Wallenberg. And this Raoul Wallenberg tried to save as many Jews as he could by giving us Swedish citizenships. Also, this Raoul Wallenberg had some other buildings where we took these families that he gave papers to over, and we went to live in one of these buildings. By that time, word has spread from the camps, so we knew what the Nazis did in those camps. And that's why my parents were very afraid for my twin brother and me, because they were afraid that if they take us to Auschwitz, we will fall into the hands of Dr. Mengele, who was well known for loving twins.
Well, the organization that was handling this whole transport, which was a Jewish organization, they decided that I had to be moved somewhere else to be reminded of that I'm Jewish and not Christian. So they moved me to a Jewish orphanage on the opposite side of Sweden. So that's where I went for 1 year. I had nothing to do with that decision. There were maybe a dozen kids in this place. It was a place to sleep, eat, and go to school. I was there for approximately 1 year. Well, the major change came about when they moved me yet to another place, another foster home in Sweden, and this time it was in Stockholm, which is the capital of Sweden. This was a ultra-Orthodox Jewish family. It was an elder couple. They had a grown son in the Swedish army, and they were very religious Jewish people. Now, so the big transition was coming from a farm, a Christian farm, where you basically ate what you grew, including the pigs and everything else, and go to church to an ultra-Orthodox Jewish place. That was a major major transition. Different kind of food, different kind of dietary habits.
The gates, on the gate that had work makes you free. Arbeit macht frei. After we arrived in Auschwitz, they lined up in lines. Dr. Mengele was on the stage, and he had a little stick in his hand. He looked at you and just motioned. That meant to the right or left. So when my line came, we were a big line, he is motioning to the left. My grandfather, my parents, 2 younger brothers and a sister. I looked to the right, and my 2 older brothers, he motioned to the right, and they say, "Come on, Dave, come on." And I stopped for a few seconds. I tried to decide, am I going with my family or shall I go with my brothers? But one of those SS guys had a rubber hose like with wires filled, and he came to hit me because I stopped. So I just ran, and I ran to the right. Everybody got a tattoo that came to Auschwitz except we were the last 500,000, and we couldn't get trains on time. So we were the last ones, you could say, because Russia was coming. And they didn't have time to tattoo the numbers, but we had a number, like a label on the shirt, just glued on. Well, in Auschwitz, we were not that long, but the food was not regular food, steady. In the morning, a cup of coffee with half a slice bread, and at noon, a soup with just either potato peels or green stuff through in. Then they send you to a work camp.
And you was working in the labor camp. The name was Maschinentruppen Übungsbad. With the Russians, the Germans, with the Russians start fighting each other, they make a place that they train the military. And we was working, we did everything what the military did. We was over there probably about 400, pretty close to 400 people.
The first job was, we were digging like for railroad tracks. There were 2 old German civilians in charge. And I mean old. One walked with a cane, and one had a stomach and just barely walked. I walked over to that old man with the cane, and I told him that his leather boots are very dirty, that I could clean them for him nice. He looked at me up and down, took me into the barrack, and he says, "I'll be back 11 o'clock." So I cleaned the 2 pair of boots. He came 11 o'clock, he said, gave me a note, "Go to the end of the buildings, the last one. You'll see the kitchen there. Give him the note, you'll bring our supper." When I gave it to them, they said, "Wait till we finish." But they always left a little bit, both of them.
It was terrible. It was unbelievable. If people, a lot of them didn't want to survive, they killed, some of them killed themselves. It was no condition to live.
A lot of people ran to the fence to touch the wires and kill themselves. My oldest brother took the 2 of us, and he made us promise that we would never do anything like that. The nights, there was nothing to it, the nights. You came home tired, hungry, so you went to sleep. It was bunk beds and just the wooden boards and a piece of the blanket.
We know that they're going to liquidate. If they're going to liquidate a camp, they kill half people. Take half people away to another camp and half getting killed. They picked my father, and I said to the German, "I go for this man, So I didn't say that's my father or something. And he pushed back the man and he picked me up like this and he took me in the front. And they took us in the line single-wise. We walked from the place where we was standing in line. The SS was on the side of us with the guns, and we walked. When we come to the grave, they told us to kneel down. We was kneeling down by the grave. I was the second in the line, and I said to the first guy, before we're going to be killed, let's grab this officer. And the officer said, you shouldn't talk here. I didn't. When he started to grab the gun, we got up, we grabbed them, and we fell in the grave because we were so close to the grave. It was 5 feet deep. And when we fell in the grave, he started in Germany. They shouldn't shoot, because if they would shoot us, he would be killed. All of a sudden they come to me. I jumped over on the other side, I ran away. My father was killed the next day. I did not know what to do. I ran away. I went into the forest. I went back to a camp by myself. Didn't have no choice. They liquidated us too, because they got a problem with fighting with the Russians, because the Russians already starting to advance the other side. And so they liquidated us and they took us to a camp, ammunition plant. When I was in the forest, when I ran away from the last camp, we hear shooting already close to us, yes. Then we hear that probably it's going on, fighting between the Russians and the Germans.
Where did you go next after Auschwitz?
To a camp called Gross Rosen. They had crematoriums there where they killed the people and burned them.
Did both your brothers remain there with you?
One got separated right away, and one I was with always here. Next, they took us all the way from Poland to Austria. Being tired, walking day and night, and not eating much. Till we got to a farm, and they always got some food. Till we got there to Ebensee, it was called. I was a skinny thing, couldn't pick up my hand or my feet. They took me what they called a hospital, but we called it a death house, because nobody ever came out alive. And we didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, one morning, no lights and no soldiers. So what's going on? So the people in the first room, somebody hollered out, let's go out and see. So they went out and saw. The gates are open and no soldiers. So in a few minutes later they came. It's the American tanks are coming.
It was hard to go out because you could get killed from the forest. We picked up our hands, we went out. It was 5 people left from the whole group when the Russian people come out. And we was, listen, they didn't even believe you. Some of them, they didn't even want to believe you that you were Jew.
We knew that the Soviets are close because we heard gunfire and we heard the cannons and the explosions, and we saw the planes coming over every day bombing Budapest. By that time, the Germans themselves were very much gone practically, because some of them were fighting on the front, which was already in the city. The Soviet army was pressing on the city. So the killing of the Jews got taken over by the Hungarian Nazis, the Arrow Cross party. And they took the people out from these buildings, including the Swedish buildings, marched them down to the river. Budapest has a beautiful big river running through the middle of it, the Danube. And they took the Jews down to the banks of the Danube, lined them up and shot them. The place, the house where we were, was not far from this place, and we could not really, thank goodness, we could not really see this, but we could clearly hear it. It was very difficult because we knew that our turn will come, that sooner or later they will come to our building also. And soon enough they did. And they ordered us that tomorrow morning, very early, we have to be all lined up in front of the building. And they told us that anybody who stays behind will be shot on the spot. And that morning, we heard the rifle butts banging on the front door, and the door had to be opened up. And there were 2 Soviet soldiers standing there with their submachine guns looking for Germans. The Soviet army took the street that we lived on that night. So if they had been only 1 day late, I would not be here today to talk to you. How can I explain the relief that one feels when one realizes that you're going to live?
Yes, the Russians liberate me, yes. They didn't harm nobody, but I did not know what to do with myself, even I was liberated.
So we got outside, then the American army came, so he announced anybody that could walk over, we'll have the beds here soon. They brought army cuts. And if not, then we'll come and pick you up. So there weren't too many that could walk. Must have been 1,000 that couldn't walk.
When I was living in the orphanage, the school I was going to, part of the school had been segregated from the rest of the school into a quarantine. Holocaust survivors from the camps were transported, the people who had been, who survived and went to Sweden. And so I saw these people, they didn't look like very, very good people. I mean, they were sick, they were thin. You've seen pictures of people with, from the camps. These people came directly from the camps to be recovered and distributed throughout the Swedish population eventually. So this was actually that camp that was part of the school I went to.
Parents survived, my twin brother survived. Most of my immediate family survived. I remember we tried to go back to the apartment where we used to live before this, but somebody else was living in there already with our stuff, our furniture, and we were in no shape to fight them.
Well, when your family survived, it was only you?
Yeah. And then we went back home, didn't find nobody. And then I went to the next town to see how my cousin family, anybody came back home. One guy came back.
And it was unbelievable when I went out and I come into my own city. They did not want you to be, they hate the Jewish people after the war. They start going after the Jewish people. They try to say, if you're not going to leave Poland, we're going to kill you. It was a hard life, and we have to leave Poland. right away. But it never goes away that I lost my father and mother when I was 14 years old and never saw them again. We took some papers and we went to Germany. We crossed the border from Poland to Germany, and I started doing a new life.
We had one of my father's brothers who emigrated to America many, many years before the Holocaust, when he was still a young man. And we contacted him, and with the help of the International Rescue Committee, we were brought to America.
A half sister to my father lived in Pensacola, Florida, and had discovered that I was still alive. And so one day a letter arrived inviting me to come and live with them. In 1946, that's when I came to the United States, and that was August the 5th, actually. The ship rolled into the New York harbor. That's where I went.
I could not tell you what day I arrived. It was probably early in January in 1957. The ship finally docked, and it docked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York. And of course, we passed the Statue of Liberty, which was an incredible, incredible feeling to see that statue and finally realize that we are in America.
When you see the Statue of Liberty, I tell you, it's an experience that is very difficult to grasp. I mean, somebody was born here, maybe it doesn't mean the same thing. Somebody comes from the other side, yes. Almost a religious experience, I must say.
Before the boat left, a day before, they came and asked everybody if they have family there. So I said, yes, I have an aunt and an uncle. But my uncle lived in Rhode Island, but a friend of his lived in Brooklyn, and he saw in the newspaper, David Murmelstein is looking for David Murmelstein. So he called them and told them. So he called up his sister, my aunt in Brooklyn, and she was there waiting for me. So that's how I got home with her.
I had an uncle and an aunt in New York who sponsored me, and he took me out, his son-in-law took me out exactly on George Washington's birthday. So it means a lot to me, the President's Day. Wasn't easy, fluent English. But then I became the tutor to my American friends, because the spelling was so bad.
And I have a good life in the United States. And it's not a better country in this world. In the United States, you can do anything you want with your life.
I felt honored to even be a part of the whole experience, and I just feel like they had a lot of courage, like talking about that experience, having to bring it up, because like I feel like it's very painful, and it's like something that I personally wouldn't want to like talk about or relive or like have to explain to anyone.
I cannot imagine myself going through the same situation as the survivors. It would have been really hard for me to like have hope, because I think it would have been really sad.
I think it was very difficult to be in their shoes, like to survive all of that, to like live without your family, without your friends, and just try to survive.
People shouldn't be going through that kind of, horrible humiliation, terror.
It's important that we keep talking about the subject after so many years because history tends to repeat itself, and this is something that is not a good thing, and it shouldn't repeat itself because we don't need more genocide and more death amongst our own people. We should be helping each other, not hurting each other.
The survivors have been through a really hard time. Them sharing it is really a strong thing for them to do. I respect what they do for us.
Thank you so much for telling your story. You really opened us up to a different view because we weren't there. We can read about it in books, but living the experience is so much different than what we read. Thank you for letting us know and making us aware of what happened back then and what we could do to prevent that and make sure it never happens again.
It's very, very rare to be able to interview somebody that survived the Holocaust, and let alone our kids won't be able to. Everyone will be gone by then. So if there's somebody that wants to do this project next year, I would absolutely agree and tell them to go for it completely. You got to take this opportunity while it lasts.
My philosophy is do the best you can with what you got to work with. That's the way. If you just do the best you can every day, then you know for sure that tomorrow will most likely be a little better.
The message to the new generation is we should see it should never happen again to anybody in the world. You don't have to be anti-Semitic to nobody. You can live your life with your neighbor.
I think what we can do to stop this from happening again is educate the younger generations and teach them from the start that compassion is one of the most important things.
Yeah, freedom has a price. You have freedom, but you have obligations to your fellow citizens, not to insult, not to do any damage, not to have preconceived ideas of somebody because of their appearance, sex, whatever it is. Do the right thing and you will be blessed. And you make sure it doesn't happen again.
You just accept everyone for their religion, if they're Jewish, not Jewish, Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter.
My message would be to make sure that this can never happen again. And the only way that you can make sure is by your votes, and that you speak your mind and do not listen to people who preach hatred, because nothing good has ever come out of hatred.
Put our differences aside, when it comes to petty wars, it all starts building up, and we don't think about the other person, and that's how it all starts. I think that we don't show much empathy, and we should start taking actions in love and not hate, because that's how things tend to calm more down instead of tensions rising. We should just stop it before it starts.